Hello everyone and welcome back to AV Chess Lab. My name is Alex and this channel is all about improving your chess. We discuss games, openings, middle games, endgames, tactics, and most importantly, we have fun doing it. If you're new here, consider subscribing. In today's game, we will discuss the game between Capablanca and Frank Marshall that was played in New York in the year 1918. The story goes that Marshall had been preparing this incredible novelty and a surprising line in what is known today as the Marshall attack that arises from the Ruy Lopez defense. Alright, so let's get started. We have e4, e5, knight to f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop to a4, knight to f6, castles, bishop e7, rook to e1, b5, bishop b3, castles by black, c3, d5, and we're going to start our discussion today arising from this position, which is called the Marshall attack. Black offers here the e5 pawn in order to get quick development and attack on the white king. If you're unsure if this is a good opening or not, it is the main weapon and go-to line of the Armenian Levon Aronian, who's a former 2800 rated player. White continues with e takes d5, knight takes on d5, knight takes on e5, this is the sacrificed pawn. Knight captures, rook captures, and here Marshall played this move, knight to f6. And due to this game, this knight to f6 move is regarded as an unsound move by the leading chess experts today. I, on the other hand, am not so sure about that. Capablanca is considered by many to be one of the best players in the world. And had Marshall played this against anybody else, maybe he would have succeeded. But Capablanca is not only a great attacking player, but he's a great defensive player. And he was just a chess genius overall. But alright, Marshall played knight to f6, but the line that is played today is c6. We have bishop takes on d5, c takes d5, d4, bishop to d6 attacking the rook. The rook retreats to e1, queen to h4. You can already see the attack building up. The queen's attacking h2, the bishop is attacking the square on g2. White has to play this move g3, but this variation doesn't offer white a lot since it's lacking a lot of development here on the queen side. Black is gonna just go queen to h3, bishop to g4, bring his other rook to the e file, and he's gonna have great compensation for the sacrificed pawn. Another line that can be played after this move to c6 is to go directly for d4 and not trading the bishop just yet. The bishop goes to d6, again attacking the rook here on e5. The rook retreats to e1, the queen to h4 again, g3, queen to h3, bishop to e3, and bishop to e6 by black. And yet again, this is another line but doesn't offer white much of an advantage. Matter of fact, if white decides now to take this knight, the bishop is going to take, and there's going to be not a lot of ways to protect against queen to g2 checkmate without having to give some of the material back. But alright, returning to knight to f6. Here, rook to e1 by Capablanca and bishop to d6 by Marshall. Already putting some pressure, as we said, here on the h2 square. Capablanca goes for h3, decides to deal with any potential attacks or sacrifices by just simply pushing his pawn, but knight to g4 anyways by Marshall. And you can already see that the attack is building some momentum. Thanks to this pawn sacrifice on e5 by Marshall, white has no minor pieces to protect the king. And just take a look at the sad situation of the queenside pieces. They're all on their home squares. Capablanca definitely must have been really worried here, but somehow just this queen and bishop on b3 do a very good job at protecting the white king somehow. In the game, queen to f3 is played, attacking the rook and bringing a piece to the defense of the king. The piece sacrifice cannot be accepted. Question for everyone that's watching this video: how many of you would have actually taken the free piece? Let me know in the comment section. Also, if you're enjoying this game thus far and you're getting some value from it, don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, so why not take the piece? Let's take a quick look. After knight to g4, If you end up actually accepting the piece with h takes on g4, this loses to queen to h4, queen to f3. This queen to h4 is just simply threatening to go queen to h2, followed by king here, rook here, queen there and rook here. And this is just going to be a disaster for white. So queen to f3 has to be played. Bishop to h2 check, king to f1, bishop takes on g4, attacking the queen, queen to e4, bishop f4, renewing the checkmate threat on h1, g3, queen to h2, pawn takes, bishop to h3 check, and after king to e2, any of the rooks to the e file is just simply going to pick up the queen. So for that reason, accepting the piece sacrifice was not a good idea. So let's return to queen to f3, attacking the rook on h8. But here Marshall just continues with queen to h4, ignoring the attack on the rook and the attack on the knight on g4. And Capablanca goes for d4. And this is the kind of move and the perfect example of the class of player Capablanca belongs to. He understands that development in such tactical positions is far more important than grabbing the material. Remember, both the rook here on a8 and the knight on g4 were hanging. But all the alternatives besides playing this move to d4 are actually bad. So let's see. If instead we have gone for this rook to e8, simply the threat is that if rook takes, we're going to go queen takes on f7, followed by queen takes on e8 checkmate. And if black does nothing, the threat is actually to just go queen to f7 check, since now this rook cannot take the queen because of this pin. So we would have won the game on the spot. So after rook to e8, the bishop comes to b7, protecting the rook now here on f8, and from this threat also bishop takes queen takes on f7, and this bishop is also attacking the queen on f7. We continue with rook takes on f8, rook takes on f8, queen takes on g4, rook to e8, threatening checkmate on e1. Notice still the very sad situation of these three pieces. The king goes to f1, queen to e7, again renewing the checkmate threat on e1. Queen to d1, returning, which makes the situation even worse. Queen to e5, now threatening to go to h2 and h1, renewing the checkmate in that way. g3, and after queen to e4, this is just a winning attack, and there's nothing that white can do to prevent the infiltration from coming in. Another move is if instead of rook to e8, could have been rook to e4, taking advantage of the pin along this file here. Now here ah5, protecting the knight, d4, bishop to b7 again, rook takes on g4, pawn takes, queen takes on b7, rook to e8, again hitting the e1 square with checkmate, bishop to e3, but after rook takes on e3, this is just a winning attack for black. This threat cannot be prevented, and if pawn takes, queen to e1 is checkmate. Another move here would have been to simply capture the knight with h takes on g4, but after bishop h2 check, king to f1, bishop takes on g4, queen to e4, bishop f4, g3, queen to h2, rook to e3, sacrificing the rook. The rook comes to e8, queen d5, bishop takes on g3, rook takes on g3, bishop to e2, king to e1, and this will be checkmate very soon. After any discoveries by this bishop, here or here, this game should end pretty quickly. All right, so d4 by Capablanca. Knight takes on f2, a beautiful move, taking a pawn and threatening to take now on h3 with check, winning the rook on e1. This is just straight up beautiful attack by Marshall. Rook to e2, and again the knight cannot be captured. Let's take a look. If queen takes on f2, rook bishop to h2 check, and not bishop to g3. If bishop to g3 instead, this would have run into queen takes on f7, rook takes f7, rook e8 check, Now notice that there's a pin here, so this rook cannot go back to f8. So this is just checkmate on the board. So coming back into bishop h2 check, we have king to f1, and now bishop to g3, queen to e2, bishop takes on h3, g takes h3, rook to e8, bishop e3. Now we capture the rook, queen captures, queen takes on h3, king to f2, queen h2 check, king to f1, and queen takes on b2, and black is just winning here. Okay, so white had to go for rook to e2 and bishop to g4 by Marshall. He just keeps throwing the hammer at Capablanca. It was just a miracle that this world champion was able to escape here. Accepting the bishop had to be done here, otherwise everything loses. So h takes on g4, bishop to h2 check, king to f1, and bishop to g3, renewing all kinds of nastiness down here. The rook had to take now on f2, queen to h1, king to e2, not afraid to go into the open. This white king has left his shelter and is now again in the middle of the board. Here also black faces the decision of which piece to take. So he takes the rook on f2 or the bishop on c1. Marshall goes for bishop takes on f2, bishop to d2, bishop h4, queen to h3, trying to trade queens. And if this happens, then white is just up too much material and should simply win the game. Rook check, king to d3, the king marches towards the safety square on c2, queen to f1 check, king to c2, and bishop f2. All the moves were also possible. If bishop e1, a more practical option actually, giving white the opportunity to go wrong with knight to a3, rook e2, rook to d1, queen f2, knight to b1, c5, trying to open more squares to attack, d takes e5, bishop takes d2 now, rook takes, and rook to d8, and it would be black winning here. Instead, Marshall played this move, bishop to f2, and after queen to f3, we have queen g1, bishop to d5, and c5 by Marshall, again trying to open up as many lines as he can so that he can continue to develop his attack. D takes e5 by Capablanca, bishop takes on c5, and b4, bishop to d6, and a4. Now finally Capablanca is able to develop his last two remaining pieces, since his rook and knight will be able to move. Marshall continues with a5, a takes b5, pawn takes on b4, and rook to a6, attacking the bishop. Pawn takes on c3, and knight takes on c3. And yes, there's no pawns in front of the white king, but he's fully developed and he's the one actually attacking all of black's pieces. Bishop comes to b4, b6, Capablanca pushes the pawn forward, bishop takes on c3, bishop takes on c3, and h6, trying to open a square to escape just in case. b7, now the pawn is just one move away from queening, and rook to e3, hitting the queen, hitting the bishop. Unfortunately for Marshall, in this position there's a forced mate in 6 moves. If you would like to give it a try, pause the video as I will give you a couple of seconds. Alright, if you found bishop takes on f7, congratulations. And in this position Marshall threw in the towel, but the remaining moves would have been rook takes on f7, we get a queen with check, king to h7, this beautiful rook sacrifice on h6 with check, king has to take, the queen gives a check in the back, and after king to g6, queen to h5 is just checkmate. This was an incredible tactical battle between two great players, and the only big mistake was knight to f6, but it took a Capablanca in order to prove that it was a mistake. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and click on one of the videos on the screen for more content. As always, stay safe, have a great day, and show respect to your opponent. See you next time.